You've probably taken antibiotics more times than you can count. A scratchy throat, an infected cut, a nasty cough that wouldn't quit, and the answer was always the same: a trip to the pharmacy and a little orange bottle. But here's the part nobody talks about. Overusing those same antibiotics has created a problem doctors are now calling a genuine crisis: bacteria that no longer respond to the drugs we built specifically to kill them. Infections that used to be simple to treat with a 5-day course of pills are becoming harder to fight, and health organizations around the world have started warning that this problem is only getting worse, not better. Every year, more people end up back at the doctor with the same infection, wondering why the medicine that used to work almost instantly barely seems to touch it now. And most people have absolutely no idea there's a backup plan already growing outside their own front door, free, ignored, and usually treated like an eyesore instead of what it actually is. Long before hospitals, before prescriptions, before penicillin was even discovered by accident in a London laboratory, ancestors and traditional herbalists across nearly every culture on Earth were already treating infection, wounds, and illness, using the exact plants most of us now spray with weed killer and throw straight into a garbage bag without a second look. They didn't have microscopes or lab equipment. What they had was generations of trial and error, careful observation, and knowledge passed down by word of mouth, and an astonishing amount of what they figured out has since been confirmed by modern science. Today you're getting 11 backyard weeds with antibiotic-like power, real plants, growing in real yards, that history and modern research both agree were doing this exact job long before modern medicine ever existed. And stay with me all the way to the end, because the very last weed on this list is something you have almost certainly pulled out of a flower bed with your bare hands and thrown straight into the trash, never once realizing what it actually was. By the time this video is over, you will never look at your own lawn the same way again. Let's start with the one you've probably stepped on 1,000 times without a second thought. Broadleaf plantain is low to the ground, with wide oval leaves and thick veins running down the middle, and it grows almost everywhere people walk: lawns, sidewalks, gravel driveways, empty lots, even pushing up through cracks in old concrete. Early European settlers noticed it sprouting wherever they built new settlements, and it eventually earned the nickname "white man's foot," because it seemed to travel with them across entire continents. Long before it had that nickname, healers across Europe and Asia were already crushing this exact leaf into a poultice for cuts, insect bites, and infected skin. It contains a compound called allantoin, studied for its role in helping skin cells repair and regenerate themselves, along with tannins that have a natural drying, tightening effect on irritated tissue, which is part of why old folk remedies treated it as nature's own bandage. The traditional method was simple: take a clean leaf, crush or chew it briefly to release its juices, and press it directly onto the affected area, sometimes holding it in place with a strip of cloth until the stinging calmed down. This is not a treatment for anything serious, so please look into it further and see a doctor for any deep or infected wound. But for minor scrapes and bug bites, this plant has been doing quiet first aid work for thousands of years, long before the first manufactured bandage ever existed. A few feet away, in that very same patch of lawn, grows a plant most homeowners consider public enemy number one, and yet it was working from the inside of the body in a completely different way. Dandelion is impossible to miss. The bright yellow flower and the white puffball that kids can't resist blowing the seeds off of, growing in nearly every lawn on the planet, whether it's welcome there or not. What almost nobody realizes is that the root, the leaf, and the flower have all been used medicinally for centuries, across European, Middle Eastern, and Asian traditional medicine alike. Dandelion has long been used to support liver function, and a healthy liver plays a central role in how your body filters toxins, processes what you eat and drink, and defends itself against illness in the first place. Some laboratory studies have also found antimicrobial activity in dandelion extract against certain bacterial strains, though this research is still developing, and dandelion should never replace real antibiotics when your body actually needs them for a serious infection. Traditionally, the root was roasted until dark and brewed into a bitter, coffee-like tea, and the tender young leaves, which are naturally rich in vitamins A and K, were added straight into salads as a spring tonic after long winters. If you want to try it, harvest from grass that hasn't been chemically treated, rinse thoroughly, and start with a small amount, since dandelion can interact with certain medications like diuretics and blood thinners, so check with a doctor first if you take any. Now picture something far more delicate, tucked into the cool, shaded corners of that same yard. A plant so soft you'd never guess it had any medicinal use at all. That's chickweed, a sprawling little plant with tiny star-shaped white flowers and paired oval leaves, most common in shady, cool spots during early spring, and often overlooked entirely until it's already spread across half a garden bed. European herbalists have relied on it for generations to calm irritated, infected skin, and it earned a reputation as one of the gentlest skin remedies in the traditional pharmacy. Modern analysis has identified saponins and flavonoids in chickweed, plant compounds tied to mild anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial effects, along with a naturally cooling, soothing quality when applied to inflamed tissue. It was traditionally crushed fresh into a poultice for boils and rashes, or slowly infused into oil for longer-term use on drier, more persistent skin irritation. To make chickweed oil, pack fresh chickweed tightly into a clean jar, cover it completely with olive oil, and let it sit in a sunny window for 2 to 3 weeks, shaking it gently every day or two before straining out the plant matter. Patch test it on a small area first, and talk to a doctor before using it if your skin is already sensitive, broken, or compromised in any way. If you're already recognizing plants from your own backyard, drop a comment right now and tell me which one you've seen growing, because the weeds coming up next are even more surprising. Along roadsides and untended meadow edges grows a plant with a battlefield reputation stretching back thousands of years. That's yarrow, easy to spot from its feathery fern-like leaves and flat clusters of small white or pale pink flowers sitting atop a single upright stem. Its scientific name, Achillea, comes directly from the legend of Achilles, whose soldiers were said to pack this exact plant onto open wounds on the battlefield to stop bleeding and prevent infection from taking hold before they could reach real medical care. That legend actually holds up surprisingly well under modern scrutiny. Yarrow contains a compound called achillene, documented for helping constrict tissue and slow bleeding, along with flavonoids and tannins studied for activity against common skin bacteria and for their mild anti-inflammatory effect. Field medics in later wars, including as recently as the 2 world wars, still dried and crushed the leaves into a fine powder to pack directly onto wounds when supplies ran short. Today, the traditional method at home is far simpler. A clean, freshly crushed leaf pressed directly onto a minor cut or scrape. Never use it on anything deep, punctured, or serious that needs a doctor immediately, not a backyard remedy. Hiding in that very same patch, often mistaken for clover until the moment it flowers, is a plant whose name alone tells you exactly what centuries of folk medicine believed about it. Self-heal, sometimes called heal-all, has small purple hooded flowers clustered in a tight spike and low spreading leaves, and it genuinely earned the reputation baked into its own name centuries before anyone tested it in a lab. Laboratory studies have identified rosmarinic acid and ursolic acid in self-heal, compounds tested for measurable antiviral and antibacterial activity against several common pathogens, which is a big part of why researchers keep coming back to this plant. Traditional Chinese medicine and European folk practice both used self-heal tea independently for sore throats and minor mouth infections, arriving at the same conclusion continents apart. To prepare it, steep a small handful of the fresh or dried plant in hot water for about 10 minutes, strain, and drink it warm, or use the cooled tea as a gargle for a scratchy throat. This is traditional folk use, not a clinical treatment, so please research this further before relying on it for anything beyond mild, short-term discomfort. Not far from self-heal, tangled along a fence line, or clinging stubbornly to your pant leg after a walk, is a plant Roman physicians once gathered for something almost nobody expects: cleaning the blood itself. That's Cleavers, the sticky hooked plant with small hair-like barbs along its stem that grabs onto clothing and fur wherever it grows, often carpeting entire sections of fence line by early summer. For centuries, Western herbalists have used it to support the lymphatic system, the part of your immune network responsible for draining waste and helping the body fight off infection before it spreads. Modern analysis has identified coumarins and flavonoids in Cleavers linked to mild anti-inflammatory activity, along with a long folk history as a gentle diuretic. The traditional preparation is a cold infusion: chop fresh Cleavers, soak them in cold water overnight in the refrigerator, then strain and drink throughout the day like a light herbal water. As with everything on this list, treat this as a traditional wellness practice, not a medical treatment, and research it further before making it part of your regular routine. Here's one almost everyone has actually eaten at some point, without ever realizing how much quiet defense it was providing. Purslane grows low and fleshy, with reddish stems and small, thick, paddle-shaped leaves, usually pushing up fast through cracked pavement, garden edges, or disturbed soil after a good rain. Most gardeners treat it as a nuisance and pull it without a second thought, tossing aside what is actually one of the most nutrient-dense plants in the entire yard. Nutritionally, it happens to be one of the richest plant sources of omega-3 fatty acids on Earth, a nutrient family well documented for lowering inflammation throughout the body, and chronic, low-grade inflammation is itself something that leaves the body more vulnerable to illness in the first place. Purslane also carries vitamin C, vitamin A, and glutathione, an antioxidant your cells depend on heavily for repair and detoxification. Mediterranean and Middle Eastern kitchens have eaten it raw in salads, stirred into yogurt, or lightly sautéed with garlic and olive oil for thousands of years, treating it as food first and medicine second. Just make sure whatever you harvest hasn't been treated with pesticide or herbicide before you eat it, and give it a thorough rinse. If you're finding real value in this list, hit that subscribe button now, because there's an entire companion list of 10 more of these waiting for you, and you do not want to miss it. Tall, with soft silvery leaves so fuzzy they feel almost like fabric, this next plant lines roadsides and neglected fields nearly everywhere, and for centuries it's been trusted for something most people never expect a weed to help with: breathing. Common mullein has a long history across European and Native American traditions for respiratory and ear health, and some native tribes even smoked the dried leaves specifically to help clear the lungs. Mullein leaf tea was traditionally used to soothe irritated airways and calm a lingering cough, while the flowers, slowly infused in olive oil over several weeks, became a folk remedy applied as eardrops for congestion-related discomfort. Some laboratory research has identified antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory compounds in the plant, including flavonoids and saponins, that may help explain why this remedy persisted across so many unrelated cultures. To brew the tea, steep the dried leaves in hot water for about 10 minutes, and strain the liquid carefully through a fine cloth, since the plant's tiny hairs can irritate the throat badly if they aren't filtered out completely. Never use mullein oil in the ear if there's any chance of a ruptured eardrum, and any real ear pain needs a doctor's evaluation, not a home remedy. Right in that same lawn, the plant every single bee in the neighborhood seems obsessed with turns out to carry its own quiet history in folk medicine. White clover, with its round white flower clusters sitting on short stems above the trefoil leaves, was steeped by Native American and early American herbalists into tea for coughs, colds, and minor infections long before anyone examined it in a laboratory. Modern analysis has identified isoflavones and coumarins in the plant, tied to mild antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory effects, though the research here is still considered preliminary. The traditional preparation was simple. Steep the fresh or dried flower heads in hot water for 10 to 15 minutes, often sweetened with a little honey for a sore throat, and drink it warm. Gather from an unsprayed patch away from where pets are walked, rinse well, and steep it fresh or dried. Because clover contains natural plant estrogens, please research this further and speak with a doctor before regular use, especially if you are pregnant or managing a hormone-sensitive condition. Here's a root that people once roasted and brewed during hard times, when real coffee was scarce or too expensive, and it turns out that humble wartime substitute was quietly doing something for the gut the entire time. Chicory is easy to spot by its strikingly blue flowers along roadsides and in overgrown lots, blooming almost impossibly bright against the surrounding weeds. Its root is loaded with inulin, a prebiotic fiber that feeds the beneficial bacteria living in your digestive tract, which is exactly why this plain roadside root became a coffee substitute during hard economic times, especially during wars when real coffee beans were rationed or unavailable. Researchers now understand that a large share of your immune system actually lives in the gut, which means feeding those bacteria well is itself a genuine form of defense against illness. Traditional herbalists also use chicory root for mild liver support, pairing it with dandelion root in some of the same folk remedies. To prepare it, dry and roast chopped chicory root until it's dark and fragrant, then grind it and brew it exactly like coffee, or simply steep the raw root as a tea. It's naturally caffeine-free, which makes it a solid option if you're trying to cut back without giving up your warm morning ritual. And now, the plant I promised you at the very beginning of this video, the one you have almost certainly pulled out of a flower bed with your own hands, thrown away, and never once realized what it actually was. Garlic mustard grows along fences, in shaded wooded edges, and in overgrown flower beds, with heart-shaped, slightly toothed leaves, close to the ground in its first year, and small white flowers rising above a taller stem in its second. Here's the detail that surprises everyone. Crush a leaf between your fingers, and it smells unmistakably like garlic, even though it isn't garlic at all, and isn't even in the same plant family. That smell comes from glucosinolates, sulfur compounds that function similarly to allicin, the well-known active compound in true garlic, and these have been studied for genuine antimicrobial activity against a range of bacteria and fungi. European settlers actually brought this plant to North America on purpose, packed carefully among their most valued seeds, using the leaves both as food and as a folk remedy for minor skin infections and insect bites. Today it's considered invasive in most regions of North America, which means pulling it out of the ground and putting it to use is good for your local ecosystem and your health at the exact same time. Harvest young leaves before the plant flowers. When the taste is at its mildest and least bitter, rinse thoroughly and use it raw in a salad or blended into a pesto in place of basil. 11 weeds, all still growing wild and free right now, within walking distance of almost everyone watching this video, quietly waiting in the exact places most people were taught to ignore. And here's what nobody tells you about any of them. Knowing what a plant can do was never really the hard part. The hard part is knowing exactly how to identify it correctly so you're not accidentally picking a dangerous look-alike, how to prepare each one so it actually works, instead of doing nothing at all, and how certain combinations of these plants can either work together and boost each other's benefits, or quietly cancel each other out and waste your time. Get any one of those details wrong, and even the most powerful backyard remedy becomes useless at best, or in some cases, something that irritates your body instead of helping it. That is exactly what I break down next, step by step, in plain, simple language, so you can use every single plant on this list, safely, correctly, and with real confidence. Click on the video right here, 10 biblical weeds that will heal you instantly, and I'll walk you through exactly how it's done, from start to finish.